If I asked you what you thought the biggest problem is with Dead by Daylight balancing right now, what would you say? Maybe some perks in a specific combo, a killer with a dominating win rate, or even a playstyle or tactic that is very annoying. And while I would agree with most of these, there is one underlying issue that has been in the game since the very beginning and is something that is the hardest to balance. That is maps. Maps are, without a doubt, one of the biggest deciding factors on if you win or lose a match. No matter how good you are or even how bad you are, a map can either completely shut down your power or make you die because of a map you got. Maps are single-handedly the sole decider on how a match can go, on if a killer can use their power properly, or if they might as well just become an M1 killer. Maps have literally always been an issue in Dead by Daylight, from them being genuinely too big, spawning infinites, tons of god pallets, or just generally confusing layouts. There are multiple issues with maps that can decide on if it's good or not, or how balanced it is towards one side. From the amount of pallets, generator spread, map type, map RNG, the strength of the main buildings, map size, loops that spawn, and so much more. All of these are difficult issues to tackle, and I bet when I was listing these, some maps came to mind to you. Let's start with the pallet issue. Pallets are, by far, Survivor's strongest resource. They can shut down a killer's power, stun them to buy time, and make distance. This is why they're usually seen as something to be resourceful with and not pre-drop every 5 seconds creating giant dead zones. However, on some maps, pallets are literally just littered everywhere, making it very unfun for killers, and then on the other hand, sometimes there's no pallets at all, leading to giant dead zones where you can't do anything but take a hit and hope you can make it to another loop in time. Let's take one of the most infamous maps in the game, for example, Pallet City, or the game. The game is one of the most infamous maps because of how many god pallets there are, or just generally strong pallets that are consistently placed around the map. The vast majority of pallets on this map just cannot be mind gamed because the pallet is placed either directly in the middle of a loop, or it's just too long for mind game. But then on the other hand, you get maps like Hawkins, which might have even more pallets, but a lot of them are just really bad. Like, I genuinely think this is one of the worst pallet spawns in all of Dead by Daylight. It is so small and short, not that there's anything wrong with that you can just M1 and hit either side on reaction. Or then you look at another room and there's 2 pallets that spawn right next to each other. If we look at the opposite end of the spectrum on maps with like 2 pallets, Dead Dog comes up. Dead Dog is arguably the most killer-sided map in the game, and it's very obvious why. The amount of pallets on this map are so horribly spread out and few that unless you play on one half of the map, you just die as soon as you get caught. There's barely any pallets on the map, plus with how tiny the map is, means that you'll probably burn through half of the pallets in a single chase. However, just because a map has a lot of pallets doesn't mean that it's a good thing. Let's take a look at this newest map in the game, Greenville Square. This map has a ton of pallets, like a lot of pallets, but most of the loops on this map aren't anything insane. The problem with having tons of pallets is twofold. 1, it means that usually each pallet isn't anything insane, meaning that when each pallet is down, it's still super easy to mind game. And 2, by having lots of pallets, it means that any killer who needs time to wind up their power gets completely shut down by it constantly. If you're playing Hillbilly or Wesker or Blight, etc., by having 50 billion pallets, it means that every time you're about to land a hit, they just have a pallet that they can drop and eat your power. Sure, they can't get a loop out of it and run you around it for a while, but every time you want to use your power, you just have to stop and eat a pallet. It's just so annoying. It's more annoying rather than overpowered, which is a big problem. Next, let's talk about map types. As we all know, there's roughly 2 types of maps: open area maps with lots of visibility, and the bane of everyone's existence, indoor maps. Indoor maps have always been a highly contested topic on if they're actually good or not, and I vehemently believe that all indoor maps are horrible and should not exist. Which is a shame because the idea of being trapped and chased in a small claustrophobic environment like a laboratory or hospital is an amazing idea. However, when it's translated to gameplay, it is one of the worst things you can get. One of the issues is that with outdoor maps like say Records Yard, Coal Tower, Crotus Pen, or even Eyrie of Crows, you can take one look around you and get your bearings and know where you are. Compare that to say RCPD, Larry's, Hawkins in the game, where it's much more difficult to tell where you are unless you have a bajillion hours and you can realize instantly where you are. Compare this to a casual player who would just look at this room and go, I'm in a room. A casual player doesn't know how to path on this map and has no clue where to go, where to find a generator, or where's a good area to loop to. They just don't know. It's hard to tell on indoor maps. This also leads to an issue with loops, because you can't see far ahead of you, meaning that you don't know what loop is there, if the pallet's up or not, or where the window spawns, because, well, you can only see like 5 feet around you. You have no clue what's near you. And it also means you can't really see generators anywhere. You have no clue where to go unless you bring Deja Vu or some sort of perk that can reveal auras of generators to you. The biggest issue with indoor maps, obviously, is killers. If you get 60% of the roster on an indoor map, you just might as well not have a power. You just can't use it. Like playing Billy on RCPD, Singularity on Larry's, Huntress on the game, etc, etc. Some maps objectively make it so you cannot use your power to the full potential. How am I, as Hillbilly, supposed to use my chainsaw to cross map effectively when there's a wall every 3 centimeters? I might as well just walk, it would be easier. How am I supposed to mark someone on cameras when there's an entrance to another room every 2 seconds that blocks line of sight? Things like these make indoor maps incredibly unfun to play as if you're not one of the killers meant for this map. And what killers are meant for these maps? Well, stealth killers. And honestly, I really hate this gameplay design, and this is why I hate indoor maps. The fact that only a handful of killers can benefit from this map design while the other 70% of the roster gets hard shut down is such poor balancing. If I'm playing Billy and I get like Larry's, or I'm playing Huntress and I get Hawkins, it's like, what's the point? I'm playing a killer who can't use their power to the full potential. I might as well just M1. If I walk at people, it's easier than trying to use my power. Then we get to the other type of maps, which are the ones that are super wide open, and these aren't as bad but still bring up issues. For giant wide open maps, you have a lot of vision, meaning that you get to see the killer coming from literally a mile away. And while sure this isn't an issue for some killers, if it's a killer who has no projectile or speed in their kit like say Nemesis, Pyramid Head, or Doctor, you can just hold W and run to a safe spot before you even hear their terror radius. Then if it's any killer who relies on walls or lockers like Dredge, or Huntress, Trickster, Singularity, the farm maps are just really bad because the giant cornfields have nothing for you to recharge or use your power, right? Like there's nowhere to teleport to here with Dredge, nowhere to place my cameras with Singularity, nowhere to bounce off of with Blight. These giant wide open parts of the map are really bad for anyone who relies on the actual environment of the map. Then there's also the issues with stealth killers that they can't really be stealthy, because if you're playing Pig or Ghostface and you see them creeping up from 40 meters away, you just can run before they even see you. This also brings up issues with stealth killers, because you can't really be stealthy with Pig or Ghostface when the entire map is wide open and they can see you from 40 feet away. Open maps admittedly aren't as bad as indoor maps, but when you're trying to run like a stealth build and you get sent on like gas heaven, there's no point. There's nowhere to really even hide because the map is so wide open. Another big issue that is maybe sort of getting better is for some reason the abundant amount of trash behavior just loves to litter all over the map. Like Borgo or Toba Landing, where on one part of the map it's so cluttered with random stuff it makes it incredibly unfun to play as, because if you're any killer who needs to be precise with their power, there's 8 billion trees or 8 billion little rocks and pebbles, little piles of debris littered everywhere, so you bump into them and can't actually do anything with your power. Or, you know, there's so many trees that if you try and go for a shot with like Unknown or Huntress, you just, oh, that's another tree I hit, bounced off of that, guess I don't get to use my power. Next is the actual issue with the size of maps, which is a big factor on how the whole map is played. Larger maps are more often than not a death sentence for most killers. Any killer who is slow with no mobility tool or needs to set up might as well just give up on playing half the map. On bigger maps like Azerov's, Garden of Joy, Torment Creek, etc., where the maps are very big and spread out, you won't really get value out of trapping the other half of the map because you won't be able to teleport there like with Hag, or you wouldn't be able to pick them up with Trapper. So your game plan just becomes 3-gen. Or if you're a slow killer like Nemesis or Trickster or Doctor, you just don't have the speed to pressure the other side of the map and rotate around to generators where you need to be. Because the maps are so big, you just have to 3-gen. You just have to give up on half the map and just selectively choose one part of the map to defend. On smaller maps, this leads to the game being way more interactive for everyone. On a smaller map, it means that the killers can get to where they need to be quicker, engage in chases quicker, and patrol the map quicker. This also means that for survivors, they get to run into the killer more often and actually play the game against the killer instead of sitting on gens all game. And I know some people will try and say like, oh, well, what if I want to be stealthy? Well, it's like, what's the point then? What's the point of playing the game if you're just gonna hide in a corner instead of actually, you know, interact with the killer? But that's just my 2 cents. While smaller maps may be more killer-sided due to how easy it is for them to get to point A to point B, it makes the game much faster and removes a lot of the downtime and boring aspects of the game when there's just nothing going on. Another big issue with map size is the gen spread. On some maps, gens can spawn a reasonable distance between each other or just 3 feet apart. Like, look at this and tell me this is fine. In what universe can a killer lose this scenario? Some maps have atrociously bad generator spawns on both sides, and then there's times where there's just generators you aren't able to defend. The biggest defender is on Hawkins with not 1, but 2 undefendable generators. These 2 generators you cannot defend. If you try and defend these generators, you are wasting so much time because you have to go so far out of the way to go up there and kick them that, you know, the survivors will already have ample time to run around, heal, do everything on the complete opposite side of the map. It's just so horrible. Finally, one of my biggest issues with maps in Dead by Daylight are the main buildings. Main buildings are sometimes the strongest points on the map to loop, and some of them are just, well, they're a bit too overpowered. Some of them have multiple god pallets in them or god windows, sometimes both. Take for example Crotus Pen Asylum on both maps. Both of these maps have main buildings that are incredibly good. On Chapel you have multiple god windows that connect into Shack, or that you can jump into main building from a generator. Then on Disturbed Ward, the main building is in the direct center of the map, meaning that you can get to it from everywhere. And it has not one, not two, but 3 different god pallets with a god window and another extremely strong window that requires you to break a wall to deal with. These main buildings 9 out of 10 times are just impossible to win in because the resources here are too good, not to mention that on both of these maps you can loop these buildings into Shack and vice versa. Like from here you can run directly into Shack with one good pallet in between. It's just so strong. But then there's main buildings like Shelter Woods or Wretched Shop, which are really bad. Like if you get this spawn with Wretched Shop, this is probably one of the strongest basements in the game. Overall, maps are by far the hardest thing to balance in Dead by Daylight with so many factors. Map size, pallet density, generator spread, what type of tiles can spawn, the distance between the loops, etc, etc. It's not like perks or killers where you can just adjust a number up or down and remove an effect off a perk, no, but instead you have to adjust a whole map by potentially cutting down map size like what happened with Eyrie of Pros or rcpd, or just rework the map entirely like Swamp or Shelter Woods. I feel like maps should be on the higher end of things because, speaking from experience, I love loading into a match as Billy only to get rcpd or Larry's and realize, well, I basically don't have a power this game. I don't really have anything else to say other than take care of yourselves and have a damn good one. Peace.